Hello and welcome, this is AgentXP and welcome to another TRLE tutorial. Today we're going to be discussing my favourite subject within the TRLE, which is lighting. So for the purpose of this tutorial we are going to start off with this room. Now this is a fairly simple room. I've added some geometry to give us a bit of interest so that we can see how adding lighting affects the room. So, we're going to want to start by turning on light meshes, and this will allow us to see the area affected by a light bulb. So the show light meshes option is in the bottom right hand side of the menu, and it's something I often forget about when I'm building, but it can be quite useful in order to see the area affected by a light bulb. So there are 5 different lighting options in the level editor. These are shown in the bottom left hand side of the menu. So here we can see the lighting panel. And for lighting you also want to make use of the colour palette, and we'll explain a bit more about this here in a moment. So there are 5 types of lights that you can use in the level editor. So these are light, which is a normal light bulb, a shadow, which does what it says on the tin. Instead of providing a light, this provides an area of darkness. We also have a sun, which mimics the effect of sunlight, and you can change the direction in which the sun shines. Then we have spot and effect. Now these are the 2 options that I personally tend not to use. So in this tutorial we are going to mainly be focusing on light, shadow and sun, although I will briefly explain the functions of the other 2. So the main 3 options that we are going to be covering today are the first 3, light, shadow and sun. So we're going to start first of all by turning on lighting. So we do that and we find ourselves in a very bright, very bland looking space. So we're going to want to add some colour to this. Now before we add any light bulbs, the first thing we're going to want to do is to turn our attention to the room ambience. And if we click here on the far left hand side, we will see some numbers appear, and these are the current lighting values of the actual room itself. And it's currently extremely bright. So if we turn our attention to the colour palette at the bottom of the screen, and we right click on one of the options, we will get a very instant effect. So I right clicked on the turquoise there and the room has gone a very shockingly bright shade of turquoise. What I typically do when I'm making a room is I look at this colour palette and I will look for one of the darker colours. So for example, if we pick ourselves a dark brown and we right click on that square, the room will turn that colour. And we probably don't want one quite that brownish, so I'm going to see if I can find one a little bit more neutral. That is not what I wanted, that's very bright. That's kind of okay. We want one a little bit darker, because my personal preference when creating a room is to have it quite dark to start with and then to brighten it up using ambient lights, and that way you can create some nice shadow effects without having to use shadow bulbs, although shadow bulbs are themselves very useful in certain places. So we're going to keep clicking around until we find something that we're happy with, and I think this colour will do. Now we could always, once we've selected a colour, if it's not quite right, then we can use the colour panel to adjust the colour a little bit. So if you want it, for example, slightly more red, we can click and you see the room start to become a little more red. If you use your right click, you will increase or decrease the value by a total of 16 each time. That can be useful if you want to quickly change the colours. So we're going to go back to our starting colour and we are going to use the left click because we only want to make the room a little bit more coloured. So what I did there was I made the room a bit more yellowish, and it's RGB colour values, so you need to bear that in mind. So red and green will make yellow. So we've made our room a bit more yellowish looking, or well, in this case it looks a bit more browny. So now that we have our room ambience sorted out, we're going to want to add a sun bulb. I always turn off face edit before doing this because when you click with a light bulb somewhere in the room, if you have face edit turned on, you will end up accidentally placing a texture on the tiles. So hence I always turn face edit off before placing objects. So we're going to want to left click with our little sun, and it's a smiley face. Because we have light meshes turned on, we can see the direction in which it's pointing. So now if we turn on lighting, we can see that our sun is shining in that direction. If we have the sun selected, it will be red, and we can use the direction keys and the control to move it around the room. You will see how this affects the room. The lighting position will change, and it's also affected by the pillars in the middle of the room. Move it around until you're happy with the location. Similar to what we did for the room ambience, we're now going to right click and choose a colour. So I'm going to choose something quite golden in order to mimic sunlight. That instantly brings the room to life. So now it looks like we have a golden sunlight, but it's not affecting a great deal of the room. So what I'm now going to do is turn face edit back off, and we're going to choose a normal light bulb, and we're going to click somewhere in the room, place it and turn on lighting to see what happened. That is very bright and it's not coloured. So I'm going to click on my light bulb, and we can now see the area that the light bulb affects because we have light meshes turned on. And if we want to change the colour, we right click on the colour palette. Whoa, that's a bit yellow, so we'll tone it down a little bit. That's quite nice. So now that kind of enhances the light coming from the sun bulb. It makes the room look a lot more sunny. There are a couple of other lighting controls worth noting, and these are the intensity and the output values. Now if we lower the intensity, what that's going to do is it's going to lower the intensity of the light, kind of what it says on the tin. So you can see the light is getting paler if we lower the intensity. So I'm going to turn it back up, and the default is 0.5. I'm going to put it back to that. We also have the output. The output controls the area affected by the light bulb. So if we lower it, we can see the red circles are getting smaller, as is the area affected by the light bulb. So you can turn it down to have a smaller light, or you can turn it up and you have pretty much the entire room affected by the light bulb. But as we can see, the pillar is still casting a nice shadow for us. So I'm going to turn it back down. Once again, the default value is 5, so we're going to leave it there. And similar to objects, you can use the floor plus and the floor minus to control where the light bulb is in the room. So if you want the light coming from higher up, you can raise it off the floor, and the same with the sun bulb. So we're going to raise them up a bit off the floor, and here we have a nice sunny looking room. So imagine you have blue sky coming through the ceiling. That gives quite a nice effect. We can also quickly texture the room in order to see the effect with textures. So I'm going to quickly use the texture walls option. I'm going to use the texture walls and texture floor shortcut in order to see how this looks with textures. Once you apply textures to the room, the lighting will look slightly darker than if you're using beta textures, as I am, because the white of the beta textures tends to reflect light more. So especially if you have dark textures in a room, when you apply your textures, the lighting is going to look a lot darker. I'm sure you'll agree that has really brought the room to life, and this is why lighting is one of my favourite things in the level editor, as you can really use it to create atmosphere. Now, speaking of which, we have some shadows behind the pillars, but assuming we want to create a really dark corner in which to hide an object, we want to select the shadow bulb, and we can now click in the corner, turn lighting back on, and you can see that the shadow bulb has had a quite significant effect. We have a very, very dark corner. Now, you may want a shadow, but you may not want it to be this intense. So what we can do is we can use the output and intensity controls, similar to those with a standard light bulb, but they kind of work opposite to those of a standard light bulb. So if we turn the intensity down, the shadow area gets bigger, And if we turn it back up, then the shadow area gets smaller. And if we change the output, then that's slightly more intuitive. The larger the output, the bigger the shadow area. So I'm just going to leave it at about 3, that's cool. But maybe we still don't want a shadow that dark. We've scaled the area down a bit, but we don't want a shadow that dark. It kind of looks a bit unnatural. So what we can do with a shadow is similar to a light bulb. If we use the colour palette, we can change the colour of the shadow. Changing the colour also affects the intensity. So let's right click on a few colours and see what happens. So if I right click on a very bright turquoisey colour, this will have the effect of making the shadow extremely red, and it's gone a lot lighter. You can create some quite interesting effects with this. So let's try doing yellow. So what I find is when you click on the colours, it generally has the opposite effect to what you expect. So if you click on, for example, blue, then it will make the colour of the shadow very red. If we click on red, then the shadow will go a greeny bluey tinge. So let's keep experimenting until we get an effect that we're happy with. I think that looks quite good. I've right clicked on a greyish colour, and if we play with the intensity a little, there we go, that's a nice shadow, and it's not too intense, and yet it creates an area in which you could potentially hide something. Next, we're going to take a quick look at the other 2 types of lights. So I generally tend not to use these 2 types of lights, but they are there if you should want them, and I'm going to give a brief explanation as to the function of them. So first we're going to place a spotlight in the room. As you see, I turned off the face edit in order to prevent an accidental placing of a texture. If we have light meshes turned on, we can see now that we've placed the spotlight that it is facing in a direction, and that direction is towards the wall on our right. So if we turn lighting back on, initially we don't get much of an effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the right arrow and control to move it nearer the wall. And if we move it closer to the wall, it's very subtle, but you will see a pool of light appear on the wall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the other light bulb away, because that will make the effect a little more pronounced. And we're also, accidental texture placement there. We're also going to make the spotlight a brighter colour, so we're going to turn up the intensity a bit, and you can see the effect. So what we're now going to do is we're going to change the direction in which the spotlight is facing. We can do this with the controls on the lighting panel, and when we select the spotlight we will get a number of different options. These include the options to adjust the X and Y coordinates, and also the length and the cut. So we're going to have a play with these and see what effect it has. If we use the X coordinate, we start to move the spotlight up and down. And if we use the Y coordinate, we rotate it in a circle. So I'm going to use the X coordinate to move the spotlight into a downward facing position. And we're then going to use the floor plus to move it upwards. Whoops, that was a bit too much. So we now have a spotlight on the ceiling shining downwards. Similar to with the color controls, you can use the right click option if you want to affect the movements more quickly. So now we have a downward facing spotlight, and we can also use the color panel in order to change the color of said spotlight. This can be quite a useful feature if you want an overhead light, or indeed if you want a light pointing up at the ceiling. So if we alter the X value and point the spotlight up at the ceiling, and we rotate, we also want to move it down a little bit, and we can now see that there is a pool of light on the ceiling, and we made that a green colour, and that is reflected on the ceiling. Another thing you can do with the spotlight controls is to affect the length and the width of the light. So if we move it away from the wall a little bit, if we increase the length, then it will increase the distance at which the spotlight shines. So we can place it further away from the wall, and it will have a broader effect in the room. So we're now going to take a brief look at the final type of light. And I've deleted my spotlight, so now we want to place an effect in the room. And we turn on lighting and, doesn't seem to have been much effect there, if you'll pardon the pun. Nothing seems to have changed in the room. But this is because the effect starts off with a 0 value. So if you want to see any effect from the effect, you will have to manually increase the intensity. So if we turn up the intensity a bit, we will see a light begin to appear on the floor. And similar to normal light bulbs, you can also colour this light. This is a slightly dimmer light than a standard light. It tends to only affect a 1 square area, and it spills out onto the adjacent tiles a little. So if you want to vary the lighting colour on the ground, then this can be a good way to do that. So we can just play around and colour the effect in different colours. And now we're going to delete the effect. Now that we have added coloured lighting to the room, we also need to consider the lighting on objects. So if I look through my object set and find an object, we have here a palm tree that's in the standard wad. And if we place it in the room and raise it to the correct location, we can see that it is not affected by the lighting that we have just implemented. It's still the normal grey colour. And I'll also find something else, say this pot, and we place that, and that is also very bright in comparison to the rest of the room. It's not being affected by the lighting. So if we want to change the lighting on an object, we want to make sure we have the object selected, so click and make sure the little name tag comes up. That shows you have the object selected. And then we want to right click somewhere on the colour palette. And if we do this, we can see that the object is changing colour. We want to pick a colour that reflects the lighting in the room. So we can go anything from bright green to bright blue. That looks a bit strange. We have a bright blue tree. So I'm going to pick something that's sort of mid-range and slightly browny, because that is the effect we have in the room. So we don't want to go too bright, we want to go somewhere in the middle. And that looks about right. So we have a slightly warm glow on the tree trunk, and that should reflect the lighting quite nicely. The same for the pot. We're going to click on it and we change the colours. We can see the pot colour changing, and yes, we can have a very bright green pot. Wow. Okay. You can create some interesting effects with this should you wish to. And we're going to select once again a sort of mid-range sunny colour. That's a little bit too bright in my opinion. Let's go a bit darker. That's a bit too orange. That's too bright. If you make them too bright, they will look gaudy. So yeah, that's about right. That's cool. So now our objects are matched to the lighting in the room, and this in my opinion is very important. Lighting objects can make your level look a lot more professional and seamless. So those are the very basics of lighting. What I've done so far is to create a fairly standard sunny room. What we're going to do next is look at the different effects you can create using different colour schemes. So we've done a sunny room. So how about we create a nighttime environment? So what I would typically do with this is create lighting that is bluey in colour. We're going to experiment with this now. So first of all, we're going to want to change the room ambience to something a bit darker. And what I generally do for nighttime lighting is choose a bluey colour. So if we look at the colour palette, and we can choose a dark navyish colour, you can see instantly this has an effect. I'm going to choose one that's a bit darker, but we don't just want blue because that's a little bit intense. So what I'm going to do is we have a blue value of 48 there. I'm going to right click the green value to turn the green up by 16, and to me that looks a little nicer than just having blue. So we've changed the room ambient lighting, but our sun bulb is still a yellowy colour. So what I'm going to want to do is click the little smiley face, and we're going to choose something in the turquoise range. So I'm going to right click on that, maybe bluey, maybe turquoise, somewhere somewhere around there. And we're not going to see the full effect until we also select the light bulb, and we're going to pick something bluey. And instantly we can see the effect in the room has changed. I'm going to click around and I'm going to see the different effects we can create with a different colour light bulb in a dark environment. You can have some quite interesting effects with this. And the best thing to do is to just have a play with it and see what effect you like best. That looks quite nice. So sometimes contrasting colours can create a nice effect, and other times it's nice to have lighting along a similar colour scale. For nighttime lighting, I tend to favour blues and greens, as these complement each other quite nicely, and if you pick a bluey starry night horizon, this can go very well. This is the same level as before. It's got Greek Tomb Raider 1 textures, but as you can see it looks a great deal different to the same level with daytime lighting. So something I tend to like to do a lot in my levels is I like to bring out the colours in the textures with the lighting. So if I have greeny textures, I like to choose a greeny lighting colour. So if I have an area of my room that has plants in it, I will quite often place a green ambient light bulb in order to bring out the colour of the plants. So let's play around. We can get some quite interesting effects. I think that looks quite cool. I'm also going to try texturing the ceiling in leaves. I know that texturing is very, very poor. That is a very quick shortcut to show you the effect in the room. And we would do a much better job on the texturing if we were doing it properly. But here you can imagine a green canopy with the lighting coming through it, and it would seem very green. This lighting is ideally suited for a forest floor or jungle level. And if we very, very quickly texture these tree trunks, here we go. If we texture the pillars as tree trunks, we instantly create the effect of being in a jungle. And this is just by very quickly changing the lighting in the room. It's gone from a Greek temple to a jungle. Another example would be to create an icy effect. So I'm going to find an icy texture, and we're going to use the texture walls shortcut once again. And we're going to find some snow, and we're going to texture the floor. Whoa, that's very, very different. And we're now going to change the lighting colour. So make sure you have the ambient lighting selected. So deselect any light bulbs you have. And we're going to change this back to blue. Yuck, that's horrible. We'll go a bit darker, and once again use the green. So we don't usually want absolute colour values, so if you've only got one colour turned on, that doesn't usually give a nice effect. In fact, we want to turn down the blue a little bit. That's a bit too bright. That's better. So now we'll change the sun bulb to something bluey, and the light bulb to something bluey. And also we are going to texture the ceiling, and instantly you can see that that changes the very same room to something very, very different. So even if we had plain beta textures on this room, it would look extremely different. I will demonstrate here. So if we get rid of our textures, we do a very quick retexturing job, that still looks very different to what we had before. You can affect massive changes by changing the lighting in a room. This bluish colour scheme also goes pretty well in city levels. So if I take a concrete texture and go texture walls, we'll find a texture for the floor here. You can see that the blue goes very well with these city textures, but we can also try something a little bit more adventurous. So if we up the red ambience in the room and lower the green, see, that's too much red. There we go. That has created a very purpley environment. So right click on the light bulb and change it to something, oh no, that's horrible. Blue probably goes better. And we can also, that's a bit too much. I'll go back to blue for that one. And what we can do is, in these alcoves, they are ideally placed. So if we just do a very quick texturing job on this, and we select a window texture, place it in the alcove, we can see here we've done that. And what I'm going to do is add another light bulb, place it in the alcove, and we're going to make this a goldeny colour light. So we'll do that, and you can see how you can create nice contrasts with the lighting. So I'm going to make that quite yellowish, and this is quite similar to the lighting colour scheme that they used in Thames Wharf in Tomb Raider 3. I've done quite a big contrast there in order to show the effect. So this is all designed to give you ideas for your own levels. And we're going to do one more thing here. We're going to try texturing the floor, and we're going to retexture the walls, something similar to Area 51. How about that? That's cool. And we will texture the ceiling. We'll just do transparent, I think, on the ceiling. Right, so now we're going to change the lighting ambience to something a bit more golden. So we're going to take off the blue altogether. We're going to manually turn up the green and then turn up the red a bit more. And we're now going to change the light bulbs to something orangey. And this creates a desert sunrise or sunset effect. And we're going to change that alcove one to something a little bit less yellow. There we go. And that has instantly changed the same room to create a very, very different effect. And for example, if we wanted something a bit more contrasting, so we have a light here that's green, we can create some nice effects with that. That looks quite nice in my humble opinion, so we're going to turn down the effect of that a little bit. So lower the intensity value, and we create a light in that alcove that is green and alien looking. What can often create a nice effect is to choose two contrasting colours in your lighting scheme. So if you have red, you could choose a greeny light. If you have blue, a golden yellowy light looks nice, and so on and so forth. You can create some quite nice effects with that. Similar complementary colours can also look good together. So if we have this room and we want it to look a bit more sunny, we can create another light bulb. Whoa, that's bright. And we pick a different golden colour, turn down the intensity a bit. We can vary the lighting in our room. Actually turn it back up a bit, lower the output. And we're creating some sun patches in the room, and if we use another light bulb that is a different colour, albeit a similar one, we can create different areas of light within the room. Even if you have the same texture on the floor, you can affect colour variations by having different light bulbs on the floor, which are similar colours but different. So those are the very basics of lighting. I hope you found that useful and interesting. As I've said before, lighting is one of my very favourite subjects within the level editor. It's the part of building that I tend to enjoy the most, and you can create some really nice effects. So all I did there was change the walls from metal, which is Nevada, to hieroglyphs. So we still have the sandy floor, we still have the turquoisey lighting, which instantly creates a nice alcove for a jade cat statue, for example. So that creates a nice contrast still. This is quite similar lighting to that used in some of my Amun-Ra tombs. So I did quite a lot of that. I had goldenly lit rooms and alcoves for jade cat statues which had a turquoise light bulb. We might want to turn the intensity down a little bit though, because the room ambience is quite bright, so if you put too many bright light bulbs next to each other, sometimes it can look too gaudy. So it creates a kind of shiny effect when you look in game, which isn't very cool. So try not to put overlapping light bulbs too near each other. It's better to space them out a bit. So those are the very basics of lighting. I hope you've enjoyed. As I've said before, lighting is one of my favourite areas of building levels, and you can create a lot of really cool effects very simply using different coloured lights. So my main takeaway message from this video is to have an experiment yourself and use the colour palette. It's really quick and easy. Have a couple of light bulbs in the room. Always use a sun bulb in the room. Even if you're using a water room, you're going to want to place a sun bulb, as well as creating a sun effect in a room. What the sun bulb does is it introduces 3D lighting on Lara, and if she approaches a normal light bulb it will have the same effect, but a sun bulb will apply to the entire room, even if it's a seemingly unlit part of the room. And also, depending on the size of the room, use a couple of ambient light bulbs and experiment with the different colours. And you may want to to use the light bulbs to bring out the colours that you have in your textures, and that can work extremely well. So this has been Agent XP. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, please do like and subscribe, and if you do subscribe, please do hit the little notification bell so that you're notified when I upload future content. Thank you for watching. TTFN.